forward to this. There we go. So from first part for before we get into what the actual assignment is there anyone who can give me feels comfortable giving me like just a general overview of what we've done in this class so far? Now, I don't mean the nitty gritty. Like, I don't need a definition. Like, think about this as less a curriculum. And I want you to think about it as like you're learning how to be a data scientist, right? What have you learned how to do? What are the steps that we've taken so far for what you should be able to do with data, or even just before? Like, you approach it, you have some problem statement, and you're like, how do I move forward? What can I start to do with this problem statement towards getting an answer using statistics?
I would say like describing and analyzing data, understanding a data set and like how many people are a part of the data set. Um,
So let's go back, Nakai. Let's go back before we even can describe the data, before we can do any kind of descriptions. What's the first thing that we're trying to do? What's the very first thing?
Analyze it.
Nope. Before
No.
we analyze it, before all of it, before anything.
Let
Is it organize it?
Before organizing, I'm not sure what words you said, Carrington.
collect.
Collect. Yes. So before you do anything, before you can do anything with data, you got to get the data first.
Okay, so collect data,
Collect data.
analyzing and organizing data.
So put it in order. So we collect data first. And what's the next thing? After we collect the data, what do we have to do with that data? We collect it, then what?
Analyze.
Not quite analyze. It's the O word. You said both of them, but it's the O word.
Organize. Organize.
Right. So after we collect the data, we have to now organize the data.
it.
Right. So now that we organize the data, what were some of the different little headlines under organizing the data? And what were the different, what kind of considerations? What was the main thing we were trying to do when we organized the data?
Grab it.
So not quite describe it. Before we got to that part, it starts with a V. It's two words, a V and an R. What are these? So, okay, let's use an actual example. We just collected, we did a survey.
Visual representation.
There you go. Yes. So let's say we do so first part is collect data. So we just collected a whole rack of data. We just collected 1.5 million responses from people, right? And after we collect those 1.5 million responses, right, we're gonna be looking at a huge Excel spreadsheet, right? And are we gonna be able to do anything with that just by looking at that huge Excel spreadsheet? No, we won't be able to do anything with it. So that's why, like Nakai said, we have to visually represent the data, right? We visually represent it. And now there were different ways. I'm not going to go into those different ways, but there were different ways that we could visually represent the data, right? Depending on, what kind of data it was, what were the types of data, like what kind of data variables they were, right? Different ways of visually representing the data. So that was kind of the bulk of organizing it. And after we organized the data, right? What do we do after that? That's when we get to the D word.
Describe.
Describe it, right? And when we describe the data, what are the things that we're trying to describe? What 5 things are we trying to describe?
Was it the V dot?
Almost, you just
The
missing one letter.
CVDOT.
Yes, the C is what?
Center.
Center.
Center. V is
Variation.
Variation.
D is
Distribution.
O is
Outlier.
outliers, and T is
Time.
time. Exactly. So that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to start off, and that's basically, that puts us here. That puts us where we are now, right? That puts us right here where we are now. All we've done, so we actually haven't analyzed it yet, right? We've just organized it, we've collected it, we've organized it, and we've described it. So we actually haven't analyzed the data yet. So now that's where we are now, right? That's where we are now. Everything we did with percentiles and Z-score, that was all in that category of describing the data and like getting a little more nitty gritty in trying to describe like an individual data point, but it's still describing the data, right? So what were those 3 big steps? The first one was what?
Collect,
Collect the data. The second one was
organize,
organize, and then the third one was
describe.
describe, right? So what we want to do and what your next assignment is to do, your next assignment is to look back and start in that initial first place, that first place being collect the data. And you need to make me like a map or like a tree, that kind of thing, right? Think like poster type thing. You don't have to do it on poster. You could do it in PowerPoint or whatever tool you choose. You can do it on paper if you want to. But basically, you're making something that walks us through the process of everything we've done with statistics, from collecting the data all the way up to describing the data, right? That's what we're trying to do. And basically, it's almost like you're creating a study guide a little bit. You want to essentially create a study guide, and when you create that study guide, what that will allow us to do, or what it will allow you to do, one, it'll allow you to check your knowledge along the way. So like as you go through it, if you find a section where you're like, I don't really understand or remember this part about the different data collection methods, right? That's your time to go back in and be like, okay, let me look at this a little deeper, right? I don't want you to just say, okay, we collect data, we organize data, and we describe data. And then you put that in a little email and you just send it to me. No, I need something that goes in depth. With collecting data, right, there were a lot of different mechanisms that we could use to collect data, right? I need you to list them all out. I don't need definitions necessarily, but like, for example, you could be like, in collecting data, right, the goal, what's the goal in collecting our data? What are the different ways we can collect data? Well, there were 2 different ways. We could take a census, right, which tells us directly about a population, or we could take a sample. And the goal for taking a sample is to use what we find out about the sample to find out more information about the population, right? So we could take a census or we could take a sample, right? And that would be like your starting point, and you're working down from there. Well, taking a census, that's just taking a census. I don't think there was anything else involved. We didn't really go into that anymore. But with taking a sample, there were different types of what? Different what for taking a sample?
Different samples, I guess.
Almost different sampling methods, right? There were a bunch of different sampling methods. So like you would list out, if we were taking a sample, right? These are the different methods that we could use to take a sample. And then the other way we could collect data was by doing an experiment. And when we do an experiment, these are the different considerations when you do an experiment, right? And then you go into organizing the data, right? What are the different ways that we could organize data? What are the different tools we could use to visually represent data to make, and why? Why are we using these tools, right? What's the overall goal? So it's like you're doing a summary, right? But it needs to be a detailed summary, but I don't want you to like, you don't have to describe it. So like when you list out the different sampling methods, you don't have to say this sampling method means this, and this sampling method means that, and this sampling method means that. You don't have to do that. You just say these are the different sampling methods. These are the different ways we could organize data and visually represent it, and this is why we want to do it, right? Then you need to go into describing data is like a whole big, like that's a lot. Describing data is a lot, right? So when you talk about describing data, you're talking about those 5 things. What are the tools that we have to describe the center of the data set? What are the tools that we have to describe the variation in the data set? What are the tools that we have to describe the shape of the distribution and what kind of distribution? What are the different kinds of distributions, right? All of that is what you're digging and you're making one big cohesive document, right? And it can be a document, again, you can do it on paper if you want to, right? If you need to draw something up, you could draw something up. If you draw something, then you need to like, you know, they had like the little trees We start off at the top, collect data, then we do this, then we do that, then we do that, and we go down from there. You can make something like that. You know, it's kind of up to you how you make it, how you format it. You'll be graded in part on your creativity, and you'll be graded in part on like the content and substance, right? So 50% of your grade will be on creativity. Does it look nice? 50% of your grade will be on substance. Any questions?
No.
I got like the Pence
You
fly.
have an outline for this?
Do I have an outline for it? No, you're making the outline.
So like, what if we miss? How do we know if we miss certain things?
Go back and watch the videos.
Okay.
Look at the slides. You know, I mean, looking at the slides should be pretty. I think looking at the slides is probably a little easier than watching the videos, just because you can kind of scroll through them and then be like, okay, I don't remember this, and you can watch the corresponding video for that particular slide. That makes sense?
So you said the slides are probably easier to go through?
Yeah, I think as a starting point, just because it might be a little harder to organize yourself if you're looking through just like if you just start watching
Whole video.
it'd be a little harder to organize yourself. And what you can do when you go through the slides, if you find something where you're like, okay, I need a little more on this, go to the video and then you can like skip to the section, you know, where I'm talking about that particular slide.
Okay.
This is due next class. Again, as usual, you know, my policy on due dates or whatever, but I strongly encourage you to finish this by next class. This will help you immensely if you are able to finish this by next class. So I strongly encourage you to finish this and work on this and finish it by next class. It shouldn't take that much time. And this can essentially take place of whatever studying you may have done for this class this week, right? And it is a big review, right? Because I really need you all to have a strong foundation as we step into the next set of topics, right? I really need you to have a strong foundation. Any other questions? Questions.
No, I don't got no questions.
All right, good. So I recorded this. I'm gonna put this up. I'll put it on I'll put this video, this assignment, and me describing the assignment. I'll put it up on Moodle for you all to review if you have other questions about the assignment. I think the assignment is relatively straightforward. Again, different mechanisms you can use. Don't ask me how many slides. If you do a PowerPoint, you got to use your best judgment. You know what we covered, put it all in the slides. You know, if you have all the information there, that's the focus. You know, I don't want you to focus on like format or anything like that. I want you to focus on content, right? I want you to focus on making sure you have all of the relevant content there. All right, so if there are no other questions, I'm gonna stop this recording.